Why do you look for the living among the dead? Two men in dazzling clothes ask the women who brought burial spices to Jesus' tomb. The women are initially terrified at their sudden appearance, but recover quickly at their question and the subsequent words of reassurance. Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. Remember? I once went to a church conference breakout session that was about failed ministry. The conference is an annual event sponsored by Parish Collective, which is an organization that seeks to connect people to be the church in their neighborhoods. It's a loose, somewhat ragtag network of mostly small and emerging communities of primarily progressive evangelical Christians. The woman who led the breakout session about failure had recently ended one such ministry. As she began her presentation, she noted that usually all the presentations at gatherings such as that talk about the success of thriving ministries. But she knew the reality that, like many entrepreneurial ventures, small startups fail at least as often as they succeed. Google, for instance, says that 20% of new businesses fail in their first year. The reality is that amongst the people attending the conference or a conference about experimental local ministry, most of them far more know about struggle and failure than the opposite. And so the session was packed, standing room only. One piece of her wisdom that struck me that day was her description of a friend who was nearing the end of cancer treatments. The friend was probably more than half dead, frankly, from the brutality of the chemo and the other treatments. Her friend looked and felt terrible. Death warmed over, we sometimes say. The thing was, despite appearances, that friend was actually healthier than she'd been in a long time. As far as they knew, the treatment had worked, and she was on her way to new life. The presenter noted how the opposite can also be true. People who look and feel like the picture of health and energy can actually be riddled with cancer or other illnesses. The paths of death and life are closer, more intertwined, harder to distinguish than we often think. Looks can be deceiving. Appearance and reality don't always match up. Living and dying are closer companions than any of us would like to think. A person might look terrible, be a total mess, and still be on a road to abundant life. Someone else might seem pretty put together, functioning well for all intents and purposes, and still be on a road of death. And what is true of individuals, cancer patients, or people living with addictions can also be true in communities and organizations. Appearances rarely tell the whole story. Get busy living or get busy dying. Andy Dufresne says this to his best prison bud, Red, as they quietly talked in the prison yard one day. Andy asked Red if he thought he'd ever get out of prison, and then tells him about a dream of living in Zihuatanejo, a Mexican town by the Pacific Ocean. He would open a little hotel right on the beach and take his guests out charter fishing for the rest of his life. It's a beautiful dream from which Red quickly brings them back to reality. I've been in here most of my life, Red reflects. I'm an institutional man now. You underestimate yourself, Andy replies. But Red is insistent. It's just shitty pipe dreams, he pushes back. Mexico is way down there and you're in here, and that's the way it is. That's the way it is, Andy affirms, and refuses to give up, saying, I guess it comes down to a simple choice, really. Get busy living or get busy dying. It's one of the most touching moments in the 1994 movie, The Shawshank Redemption, and one of the most quotable. Get busy living or get busy dying. Will you risk death so that you can really and truly live? Or will you stay put, continue with the status quo, even if it means staying on a road to death? And how do we know the difference? I'm not going to tell you how it all ends up in the movie, but if you haven't seen it and you don't know, I certainly recommend you solving that problem, The Shawshank Redemption. I'm sure you can find it. I am about to create new heavens and a new earth, the prophet Isaiah proclaims to people who knew the sting of death and the hope of new life. They had lived in exile in Babylon for 50-odd years and were in the midst of returning and rebuilding their homes, their society, their life in Jerusalem. Their new life would have looked and felt a lot like death as they endured grinding poverty and ongoing conflict in their quest to claim God's promise of life abundant once more. For a people traumatized by having been taken from their land and their lives decades earlier, Isaiah proclaims hope. The former things shall not be remembered or come to mind, but be glad and rejoice forever in what I am creating. For I am about to create Jerusalem as a joy and its people as a delight. The sight of destruction might remain scarred with death, but the reality of new life was underway. We don't often hear readings from the Old Testament on Easter Day, or indeed throughout the 50-day season of Easter. This year, however, here at St. George's, we've been chosen to be part of a trial to explore some proposed revisions to the assigned Bible readings week by week. It means that this year we'll hold stories of our Hebrew forebears alongside the good news of Jesus and see what new life it might bring to our experience of Easter today and throughout the season. While Jesus' resurrection is decisive in salvation history, today the prophet Isaiah reminds us that the mystery of new life is also consistent with how God has acted with grace towards God's people throughout history. The people of God have known trouble, betrayal, and suffering and death before, and the people of God have received new life before. Resurrection never relives the past, but in resurrection, God is always creating something new, new heavens and a new earth. I wonder what new and resurrected life God will gift us with this year. For our part, we always have a choice. We can get busy living or get busy dying. We can look for the living among the dead, or we can remember how Jesus told us that while betrayal, suffering, and death would come, on the third day, Jesus would rise again. We can let our fear transform into an awe and wonder that takes us away from death, away from the tomb, and into new life. It's okay if we don't believe. We don't need to believe right away. The disciples didn't. And so for today, we can just be amazed at God's commitment to life now and always, and rejoice.